In this tutorial, we will make this 4-sectioned picture reveal and save it as a macro that can be used on the Edit tab. Okay, back to tradition. We're going to be working in Fusion, so you need to find your Fusion comp. You'll find it by coming to the top of the screen, making sure your effects library is turned on. Go to Effects, and at the top here you've got your Fusion composition. Or if you've starred it, it will be down here in your favorites bar. So bring on your Fusion comp. We'll leave it at 5 seconds. To make the effect, it's only a couple of seconds, but 5 seconds is fine. What we will do in this video is we will make the quad reveal effect. What I will then do is make a second video that expands on that effect to make it into a standalone title. Okay, into Fusion. Just before we get into the tutorial, I want to have a quick discussion about coordinates in Fusion. Fusion doesn't use pixel measurements. Fusion uses percentages of the screen, if you like. So when it's talking about position and size, it's talking about percentage of the frame. The coordinates start in the bottom left hand corner and at 0, 0, and go up to the top right hand corner, which is 1, 1, and then you have various points in between. So the middle of your Fusion window is 0.5, 0.5. So you then have these various points around the outside. I've highlighted these points particularly because we're going to use them in the tutorial, and it just helps to sort of get your head around what the coordinates are. Okay, so the first thing we need is an image to work on, and we'll use this image. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to slice her into quarters and have each quarter animate to reveal the picture as a whole. The nodes needed are basically the same, so what we'll do is we'll set up one quarter and then just copy and paste the group of nodes and adjust the various settings. So we'll start by doing the top left hand corner. So the first thing we're going to need is a transform node. The reason we need a transform node is as each quarter comes in, the image is zoomed out and then settles back to its normal size. So we will pipe our image into the transform node. Now what we need to do for each quarter is have the image zoom at the center of the quarter that we're working on. So we need to move the pivot. Now, if you remember from our coordinates that we talked about a minute ago, we need to get our pivot into the center here, which would equate to an x value because x is horizontal of 0.25 and a y value, which is vertical of 0.75. So come to your pivot and input those values. So now you can see you've got your pivot point here, and we can animate, when we get to it, we can animate our transform to zoom, and it will zoom from that point. But we'll do that in a minute. So once we've got our transform set up, we need to be able to make the rest of her disappear. So we need to merge our transform onto a transparent background. So come to your hotbar, grab a background and bring it in. Take the output of your transform and put it onto the output of the background, and this automatically creates a merge node. Select your background and just drop the alpha to 0. So now we need our mask, and to make the animated mask I'm going to use 2 rectangles. So bring in your 2 rectangles, and I'm going to use a matte control. There's various ways of doing this, but I've just found the matte control seems to work quite well. To set the matte control up, you're going to take the output of rectangle 2 and put it into the yellow background input of the matte control. You're going to take the output of rectangle 1 and put it into the green foreground input of your matte control. Now if you view your matte control in the viewer, Anything that's white will allow the image to show, anything that's black will make the image transparent. And what we need to do is animate these rectangles, but first we need to set up our map control to do what we want. So select your map control, come to combine and change it to combine alpha, and combine op change to minimum. And now if we take rectangle 2, which is going to be our animated rectangle, and move it, you can see the effect that it's having. Basically, by selecting minimum, the map control will only show areas where the two rectangles overlap. So if you take it off completely, everything disappears. Okay, so setting it up, rectangle 1 is going to be static, and we want rectangle 1 up in this top left hand corner. Now if you remember from a second ago, we've just said that that top left hand corner is at x 0.25 and y 0.75. So if we do that, it puts our rectangle where we want it. Now we're going to animate the second rectangle to come from bottom right and go up to top left. So again, it's just about entering the coordinates at our appropriate keyframes. So if we come back to frame 0 as our starting point, select rectangle 2, and we want it down here somewhere, which is going to give an x of 0.75 and a y of 0.25, and enter those. So now we've got our rectangle starting down this bottom corner. We need to get it up to the top left corner. Timing wise, I found just over half a second seemed to work quite well. I'm on a 30 frame per second timeline, so I'm going to come to frame 20. Still, oh, actually go back to frame 0 because I didn't keyframe it. So on frame 0, just set a keyframe, then come to frame 20 and change the values so that we've got the top left coordinates, which are going to be 0.25 and 0.75, like so. So now when we play it through, our rectangle comes up. And if we now attach that to the blue mask input of our merge node and view the merge node, what you can see is that that top corner of the girl gets revealed. Now, if you remember, we talked about the transform node to make the image zoom. So using the same keyframes, so 0 and 20, come to your transform node. Keyframe will set the size to about 1.5. It's a preference thing. Play around and see what looks good for you. Set a keyframe, come to frame 20 and just reset it back to 1. It's less evident in this particular quadrant, you'll see it more in others, but as it comes in, your image is zooming. Like so. And that is your basic building block. So all we need to do is make 3 more copies of this, one for each quadrant. So if you drag select all your nodes, press Control or Command C, click away, Control and Command V, and this sets up your second quadrant. So what we need to do is take a second output from our media and pipe it into the transform node. And now we need to go through and change the positioning and the keyframes on our rectangles and our transform node. So positioning first, so select rectangle 1_1 as it now is. So this is our static rectangle and we need to move it to this top right hand corner. So we've got an x value of 0.75 and a y value of 0.75. like so. Now we go to our animated rectangle. At the minute it's keyframed at 0 and 20, so we'll stick with that for now. So go to frame 0, so your start point, and you want it to start in the bottom left, so that's going to be 0.25, 0.25. And you want it to end in the top right, which is going to be 0.75, 0.75. So come to frame 20. Like so. Finally, we come to the transform node, and again we need to change the pivot of the transform node so that it's zooming at the right place. So if you remember, we had our original pivot here, and we're going to move it over to the other side. So again, 0.75, 0.75 for your pivot. Like so. So now if we merge these two together and view that merge, we have our two pieces growing in. Now what you need to do is offset that slightly with the animation. Now there's keyframes on both these. You can go in and manually change them, or you can use your keyframe editor. If we bring our keyframe editor up, so your keyframe editor is at the top of the screen here, and if we select the rectangle and the transform, it now puts those keyframes into our viewer. And all you need to do is offset them by 5 frames. So if you come to frame 5 and then holding the control key and scroll your mouse wheel, you can zoom into this window a bit. Click, drag and select all the keyframes, grab one of them and just move it over until it sits at frame 5. So now we've got our images come in, but they're slightly offset. And now we're going to repeat the process again. So select your nodes, copy, click away, paste. Again, we're going to need an output from our media. And this time we're going to be working in this bottom right hand corner. So again, come to your first static rectangle. The coordinates here are 0.75, 0.25. And position your static rectangle. Next we come to our animated rectangle. We want him to come from the top here, top left down to bottom right. So come to the keyframes, which now are at frame 5. And set your coordinates for up here, which is 0.25, 0.75. And then we want our end animation, which is currently at frame 25 down here, which is going to be 0.75, 0.25. Finish with your transform. Move the pivot down to 0.75, 0.25. And bring your merge. And now we have 3 pieces. Again, we need to offset the keyframes. So open your keyframe editor. Select your transform in your rectangle. And this time we're going to be at frame 10. Select your keyframes and just slide them along. Just check everything's cool. And then finally do your last quarter the same way. Again, you're going to need your image, piped into your transform. And again, we're going to go through and reposition everything. So static rectangle first is now at 0.25, 0.25. Animated rectangle, come to your first keyframe, which is currently frame 10, and we want it to start top right, which is going to be 0.75, 0.75. And we want it to finish bottom left, so come to your last keyframe, and now it's 0.25, 0.25. And finally, we need to offset the animation. So again, open your keyframe editor, select your rectangle and your transform. And this time we're going to set to frame 15. Grab all your keyframes and slide them over. And that, in a very rough form, is it. So if we just add the final merge in, come to the start and play through, we get our 4 pieces coming in and zoom in, and it all looks lovely. A couple of niceties that need to be addressed. First one, if you notice on her face, you've got these lines. These are where the mat joins. I'm not quite sure why it does that. I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but it seems to mess up the edge of the mat. So the way I've found to get around that, or to stop that happening, is if you come into each mat control, so start with your first one, come to threshold and just drop the high to 0, and just do that for each of the 4 mat controls. And then that gets rid of that annoying line. The other thing that needs to be done, at the minute the animation is very linear, everything moves at exactly the same pace all the time, so we're just going to ease that. And the way we do that, come to the top of the screen and select spline. This opens your spline window. If you come to the 3 dots here, if you haven't got all your animated nodes listed here, come to the 3 dots, you'll see at the top show only selected tool, just deselect that for now. And now you've got the splines for all your animations. They may or may not be checked. It seems to be a bit random as to whether they're checked or not. Anyway, if they're not checked, just check them so that they're all selected. Now if you come to the top of your spline window here, you've got a zoom to fit button. Do that, and now you can see all your keyframes as splines. Click somewhere in the window, press Ctrl and A to select all your keyframes, and then press S to add smoothing. What you can also do is exaggerate that. If you press T on your keyboard, this brings up the ease in, ease out values. I just locked them and made them both 50, like so. Close your spline window. We're almost there. A nice smooth sort of reveal. Now what I did was I actually made this into a macro so that I could use it again, and to do that we want it as an effect. If you're saving macros as effects, you need to select all your nodes except your media in and your media out. You don't want those. So, the other thing you need to do, if you want to make this into an effect, because our media in is split between the 4 different sections, Resolve gets confused. It starts looking for sort of 4 lots of things to input and it can't find them. So to get around that, just after the media in, if you hover your mouse over the pipe so it changes color, hold the Option or Alt key and then just click, And this places this little square thing here called a pipe router. So now when you're saving it as effect, you will save the pipe router, and so the effect is just looking for one input. So all we need to do, come to the top. We're not making anything in this editable or changeable on the edit page. We just want the effect as is, so you can select all your nodes, right click on any of your nodes, go to macro, create macro, give it a name, and come to the top of the screen. You've got file, select that, save as group, and then you need to find your effects folder. By default, everything tries to save to the macros folder. So if you just go back a level to Fusion, you'll see templates, and in templates you will have effects, and that's where you're saving it to. I'm not going to save it because I've already got it, but that's where you would save it to. So once you've saved it, come back to the edit tab, find some footage or a picture, makes no odds, it works for both. Have it on your timeline. Now if you go to your effects library, it's probably easy, it depends how much you've got. I've got loads of crap on mine, so hit search and search for whatever you called it. So we've got quad reveal effects, drop it onto your image, and now the start of your image will be your little reveal. What you can do is, if you have several images, you can stack them on your timeline like so, and you can add the effect to each of your images. And now you can work through, decide where you want the change to happen, so you can let it run for a bit, say to there, and then bring in your next clip, and that will start to show. Again, decide where you want the next one to start. Like so. So now, if you then right click on each clip, render cache fusion effect, and it will cache the effect for each of your clips. And once all that's done and you've got your little blue line, you've got a nice sort of reveal thing going on. What you can also do, if you notice that many of the pictures don't actually fit the frame, so all you need to do is, if you select the appropriate clip and you can zoom it if you want it to fill the frame, the effect still works. So again, this one's a bit short, so we can bring it out. Like so. And there you have it. As I say, what I'll do is I will do a second video where I use the same sort of technique but make a standalone title that will look something like this. And with this title, you'll have the option to put in whatever pictures you want, change the the colour and the text and all that kind of malarkey. I will do that in the next video. For now, we have our effect that you can slap on and use as a transition or whatever you want, really. Just a little funky reveal. You can do a rather rapid photo slideshow thing. If you want to use it as a slideshow, then I guess slow the timings down. So yeah, I hope that makes sense, and maybe it's something you'll want to use. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Comment if you feel the need, would be nice. And I will see you on the next one. Cheers.